I'm Jack,
And I'm Brenden,
and we're coming to you from beyond the terrarium.
where DIY meets naturalistic reptile keeping.
Enjoy. All right, we are recording. Welcome to the first episode of Beyond the Terrarium, the podcast focused on naturalistic keeping and DIY reptile care. My name is Jack Oliver. I'm joined by Brenden Meyer. Go
What's
ahead, sir,
up?
and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Brenden, BM Exotics. This is
Leopard
basically,
gecko aficionado.
the lizard guy now. No, so this has been like a little while in the making. Me and Jack talk about naturalistic care and like how to better take care of animals that we have. Try to keep them as naturalistic and as close to their natural habitat as possible, while still, not breaking the bank. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think we've both got very similar mindsets when it comes to keeping reptiles and how to go about it and the ways we provide for our animals. And I think it'll be interesting to talk about that and learn more about it together. I think you and I are both on the same page of like, we are definitely not experts in this field. And I don't think the goal of this is to tell people how to do things. It's more of like to have thought-provoking conversations with each other and other people in the field who, have good ideas and are doing cool stuff. And I think, throughout this experience, we're going to try new things and try to figure out, how to improve our own methods. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be pretty fun.
Yeah, and like
What?
we were talking about before, it's it's kind of a selfish endeavor, Like we both want to learn as much as we can to care for the animals the best that we can, So I think it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a good time. There's no real podcast out that's solely focused on what we want to focus on, so hopefully people dig it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that, talks about this in a certain way or talks about it or touches on it. But I think what we want to do is focus on it because I don't know about you, Brennan, but for me, like the most enjoyable part about reptile keeping is setting up cool ass exhibits for them to be in, And I think
Absolutely.
talking about how we can do that better and how we can have enclosures that the animals use better with each other and then other people is just going to be amazing to develop that in our own collections. Like I think, hopefully this podcast, goes somewhere and does something. But I think the coolest part about it is getting to see, how we evolve throughout the process of this podcast as well. And I think we'll definitely detail all of that as we go. So, Brendan, why don't you give the people, the listeners, a little idea of what you got going on, what you keep, and what your current collection is, and what your plans are.
Yeah, man. So the collection has changed pretty dramatically over the past like 2 years. As like anybody that follows my Instagram knows, I've went from very snake heavy to very lizard and gecko heavy. I think I'm down to like 10 snakes total, and 2 years ago there was like 60 of them in this house. So like I've downsized quite a bit on the snakes. So I only focus on, I'm looking like they're all like behind the camera right now, but mostly coastal carpets. I have a pair of Brettles from the homie Ben frame. And then I have the lone female bear dye that I got gifted to from Justin Smith. So snake wise, like, I don't know, I used to be solely, I was just going to do carpets. Like I was going to be that guy that had a room full of nothing but coastal morphs and projects and all that stuff. And then I started getting into the geckos, and like the cat gecko stuff really kind of solidified my love for things with legs, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So the main focus now is the cat geckos for sure. They're kind
That's
of
awesome.
my nemesis, I guess you could say currently, because they're breeding, but they're not. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that whole story, but
Yeah.
other than that, it's
What?
just
Oh, we lost Brenden for a second.
of leopards going. That's solely what I'm breeding currently, because I mean they breed so easy, So, and then I got the pair of monkey lizards, which I think we're going to get into a little bit in this episode.
Absolutely.
I'm building a big, massive enclosure for them, so we're going to dive into that a little bit. And then we just have a couple gargoyles hanging around that the girlfriend's super own lychee, so that's pretty much it. We're mostly geckos over here now.
So, what was it about the cat geckos that kind of stole you away from carpet pythons?
Dude, I don't even know, man. Like, I saw a picture of one, like a wild caught, like out in the bush kind of picture, like the in situ kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was and this was 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago. And like, it's always been in the back of my mind that, like, I think like this is the species that I want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was walking around a local show, because we don't have nothing crazy here. It's mostly your typical reptile shows, ball pythons and crested geckos and whatnot. And this guy had a male, I'm pretty sure it was a wild caught male, but he had a male cat gecko in like a little tub, like off to the side on his table. And I was like, dude, how much do you want for this? I didn't ask any questions about it. I just knew I had to have it. So he sold it to me pretty cheap. And then as soon as I got home and started playing with it, dude, I just deep dived down the rabbit hole. And now I have like a dozen of them. They're just cool.
Amazing.
They're the coolest.
Yeah.
They're the coolest, most easiest gecko. I don't know. It's just a cooler crested gecko, man. They're insane.
Yeah. And what I'll add to that is I was with Brenden when he got a couple at Daytona, or not Daytona, sorry, Tinley in Chicago recently, and I've never seen somebody get as excited as Brenden got about these geckos. So the passion is real, and I think it's interesting, and I think it's something that we would definitely want to talk about how your keeping style has changed since getting those, and like like the change between snakes to geckos and like the different mindset that those like sects of the hobby have,
Yeah.
Which I think would be interesting to talk about at some point too. So
Yeah, it's
that's awesome,
crazy
man.
because it was like mostly tubs. I kept my snakes in tubs. I'm not ashamed to say that. And you
Yeah.
can see behind me, I still have leopard geckos in tubs. So I mean, I'm not against tub keeping, but when I got more lizard heavy, I'm definitely really, really into building the backgrounds and the enclosures, and really making them look naturalistic, real plants, bioactive substrate. I mean, the works, LED, UVB, all of it. And that's really, because I'll be honest, like keeping all the snakes, I was kind of in a slump, because it was just like you walk in the room and it wasn't exciting, I guess,
Mhm.
like everything just in tubs, you couldn't really see much. And then now doing all the cages naturalistic with plants and nice lighting, and it just makes it so much more fun.
Yeah. And the geckos probably want to bite you less than the
Yeah,
snakes do.
exactly. Absolutely.
We love carpet pythons on this show, and we're not
We
going to
do.
do any carpet python slander, but they can be painful sometimes.
Yeah, they can be assholes. Everybody knows it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. And I think one thing we should also comment on is the room that you're sitting in right now.
Yeah.
If you don't follow Brenden on Instagram, you definitely should. But his new reptile rooms that he just got set up are pretty amazing. So I think we'll have to maybe on the Instagram page do a little highlight on those rooms, because they should definitely be shown off. So
Yeah, I plan on doing that, but it just kind of on the back burner, but I'll get to
Yeah.
it. They're insane. I'm not
Yeah.
just saying that because they're mine. They are actually insane.
Yeah. They make you feel like you're in the environment of the geckos while you're actually like caring for the geckos, which I think is, I think definitely a topic for a show at some point in the future of like how to make not only your enclosures, amazing, but how do you make your room just as amazing and make you feel like fully immersed in it. I think, there's a lot of concepts in zoological institutions where they do, immersive exhibits. And I think, it's definitely possible to do that in your home as well as Brenden is showing behind him. So definitely a subject we should talk about for sure in the future.
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like I've been talking a lot. So
no, you're good, man.
You're dive in because you have cool stuff, man.
I'll dive into and guys, for anyone listening, like this is our first go around, so we're getting acquainted to the podcast game. So it's no easy feat for sure. So
give us a few episodes, man.
Yeah. This is gonna be good. I'm telling y'all. Okay, so my collection. So I have kind of a Noah's Ark situation going on. Still, it's less so as I become more focused throughout the last couple of years. But I've definitely I just love everything. It is hard for me to say no, I don't want to keep this, or no, I don't want to keep that. I would keep everything if I could. It turns out once you have over probably like 15 animals, if you're keeping a bunch of different stuff, it's very hard to maintain that well. Just because it's like, you got 5 lizards and, a couple of turtles and snakes. And it's like, it's just all different routines you got to keep track of. So I've kind of switched a little bit of how I've been keeping. I used to keep some geckos and some other stuff. But I currently made a list today. I keep 16 turtles and 16 different snakes, and then 1 Kevin. And Kevin is a smooth-fronted caiman from South America. So he's, in the dwarf caiman complex of the Paleosuchus. So he's Paleosuchus trigonatus. He's about 3.5 feet. He currently lives in a very large 8-foot by 8-foot enclosure in my basement with a 400-gallon pond. So he's living it up down there, and we'll definitely do an episode kind of talking about that enclosure and, the ethics of keeping large animals. But that's Kevin. On top of that, I've got 4 carpet pythons. I have 1 tiger jaguar carpet. I have a citrus tiger het albino and a Balin red that I actually got from Brenden. And then I've also got a baby Brettles right now. So those are the carpets. I've got my OG ball python, who I've had for, I don't know, since 2008. So what is that? Like 16 years now. Mm-hmm. So pretty long time I've had him. And then got Eastern king snake, a couple of corn snakes, some yellow rats from Beaufort County, South Carolina, gray rat, black racer, a couple of water snakes, albino checkered garter snake, and I think that's everything snake wise. And then turtle wise, I've got everything. I've got an alligator snapping turtle, got a box turtle, a couple of North American wood turtles, South American wood turtles from the Rhinoclemys genus, stink pot, yellow slider, a couple of hybrids, hybrid sliders, Florida red belly, and then my prized possessions are Podocnemus unifilis, which are yellow spotted Amazon river turtles, and then Geoclemys hamiltoni, which are Indian spotted turtles. So I've got 2 each of those that I was donated by the TTPG through their their colonian propagation program. It's a lot of acronyms there. So those have been super cool to work with recently and be involved in that organization. I love the TTPG. I think, all sectors of the reptile hobby should have something like that. I think it's an amazing organization. I think it's, the best thing for the hobby. So yeah, that's what I keep there. It's a very wide range of animals. Everything is pretty much in naturalistic setups unless they're grow outs. And so I have a couple of grow outs in tubs, but they're the gasket tubs with lots of space. So I try to keep them as naturalistically as possible. But with babies, you got to make sure you can clean the substrate easily, and there's just no reason to go ahead and set up a bioactive or naturalistic enclosure, I think, for them when they're not ready to be in it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but everything else is in large display enclosures, and I think that's kind of where my focus is going in the future. Is trying to make sure that all my animals are in a display, but not only display for myself, but a display that is suitable for them and allows them to express all their significant behaviors. And that's something I definitely want to talk about a lot, is the concept of significant behaviors and how we develop enclosures to allow animals to express these behaviors. So I think that's me, man. It's a lot of random stuff all over the place.
I think everybody's been there though. Like, I mean, when you said, as soon as you said the Noah's Ark stage, man, it like brought back memories of me just a few years ago. Like little bit of everything stuffed in a room, just trying to figure out what you like, what you want to work with, what you're going to enjoy working with, kind of deal. At least for me.
Yeah.
And it's fun when you finally get to, not saying that you're not focused on what you have. I'm just saying for me personally, when I focus down on, because I wanted a little bit of everything before, I just wanted the numbers.
Yep.
I just wanted to have the animal. And now that everybody's almost in cages that are, they have branches to climb, they have nice lighting, etc. It's like, it's more about the quality and the, you walk in a room and you want to be able to see animals be animals,
Yeah.
And you definitely have that going with as much as you keep, you definitely have, it's awesome. So cool to see. Especially Kevin's enclosure, man, which we'll dive into in its own episode. But
yeah, we gotta definitely do a whole episode about that for sure.
Yeah, it's insane.
Thank you though. I appreciate that. That's that was definitely my goal. My room, and I'm sure we'll post some stuff about what my reptile room looks like now, but it's it's not basically all of my reptile room is in a crawl space. It's basically a walkout basement that's actually technically called a crawl space, but so it's not like the most appealing to look at. So I guess I wanted to compensate for the unappealingness of the room with the beauty of the enclosures. And so I'm not there yet, but that's every day when I go down there to work on stuff, it's with that goal in mind. So yeah, I appreciate that for sure.
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of like what this is, though. I think this is continuous improvement and learning and trying to figure out like new ways to do things. I don't want to have any two of my enclosures look the same. I want them all to be different and intriguing to look at, and different for the animals. And in the case that I wanted to rotate them, I'll talk about this a little bit now, but I think it's something that we should, dedicate more time to eventually. But so when I went up to visit Brenden, we went to NARBC Tinley. We went to the St. Louis Zoo as well, and one of the exhibits that really stood out to me was this brand new monkey exhibit that they had, and it was this insane complex of all these enclosures, and the enclosures themselves weren't necessarily like the craziest thing ever. They weren't like the most beautiful exhibits, but what I thought was cool was that every single exhibit was connected, and the monkeys that were in that exhibit were only in that exhibit for the day, and then they would like rotate them to a different exhibit. So when you're walking through this as a guest to the zoo, you could see a different monkey in every exhibit every day you came. So from a viewer's perspective, I thought that was really interesting. But then also from a monkey's perspective, like, I don't think that there are many places or many zoos, and maybe that's what it's becoming. Like, it's becoming a more common thing, but I don't from my memory, I've never seen that before, where they could just rotate animals between enclosures and allow them that enrichment of smelling a different monkey, or having a different viewpoint of the zoo, or like just having a different experience that differs that day from the previous day. Like, you think about an animal's life in a zoo or in your home collection, and they're in the same exhibit, same enclosure every day, which, it's just part of it. That's how it is. And
Yeah.
but I think the concept of being able to rotate animals and allow them to have those different experiences and different smells and different days, allows them to break up kind of the monotony of life and experience new things. And so, just thought I'd share that story because Brennan and I experienced this together, and
Yeah.
thought it was interesting.
And on that note too, about the becoming stagnant in the same enclosure, like this male Brettles I have from,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in a tub when I first got him in quarantine, obviously, and then I have a picture on in my Instagram, but I built this 3-foot black box with like the red rock background with the ledges and stuff, and I put him in there, and like I know snakes they're not happy, they're not sad, whatever, I understand that, but like as soon as I put him in that enclosure, it was just like tongue flicks galore. He was exploring everything, looking at everything. He was really, really active. So he was in that enclosure for a little while, and then I ended up sending Sriracha, my big tiger female, to our buddy Zach on a breed loan. So, and I wanted to give him more space, so I cleaned up her enclosure and put him in there, and it was the same thing. Like he was so,
Mm-hmm.
it's just crazy how active they are. As soon as you put them in a new environment, they're just checking everything out. They're going in all the little crevices, and they're going around the sticks and through the hide, and it's just, I mean, there's got to be something to that,
Mm-hmm.
because in the
Absolutely.
wild they're not just sitting in one spot. They're exploring. They're seeing different things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to have some sort of benefit.
Yeah, and I think something you mentioned that was pretty interesting was the not happy or sad, which I also thought was interesting about the way that zoos look at it is they're not taking it from a happy, oh, this animal's happy because we did this, or this animal, is sad because of this. It's like we're not anthropomizing. I don't know how to say that word. Anthropomorphizing. I think that's it.
There you go.
We're not anthropomorphizing them. We're not applying human emotion to them. We're just trying to give them mental stimulation through differing days, so that we don't know too much about how much of a snake remembers, or how they think about past and present and future, but like the ability for a snake to differentiate, like, oh, yesterday this happened and today this is happening, I think is important to think about just as you go forward in creating enrichment for your animals. Because I think a lot of times we're like, oh, enrichment, like let's put I don't know, a cardboard box with a mouse in it, or make them find their food, which I think is great. And I think any sort of mental stimulation is great. But like on a larger scale, like they still, at this end of the day, the behavior that they're exhibiting is the same. Like outside of the searching for the food, they're still eating. It's like, how do you do like the exploration, or like the new experience that they've never had, or something like that,
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
I mean, that's a rabbit hole that we could go down forever.
I've even had the thought of like, in theory it works, but in practice I feel like it'd be kind of difficult to do. But almost like, okay, like when people like cat people, they build like the walkways. It's kind of like the thing at the zoo, like they build the walkways up top where they can go from like this side to this side. It would depend on a lot of factors, obviously, and you would probably have to have a very low amount of animals to do this properly. But like, I know people use the PVC tubes to connect breeding pairs in cages. But like, what if you did that? You had a 4x2 that had a carpet in it here, with a tube that went to like a 3x6 tall that had like a tree in it. And they could. You block it off. They spend time in this cage. You open it. They spend time over here, kind of deal. To where it's all their own cage, but you kind of section it off for like, okay, these days you're here, and these days you can go over here. Climb 6 foot up in the air in a tree, because we know carpets love to climb.
Yeah.
or like even, I mean, even just like offering like different meals, obviously, is mentally, they're, you offer a rat or a quail or whatever, or it's stimulating them somehow, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's little things. I think day to day make a big difference that a lot of people don't
Yeah.
even think about or consider.
Yeah. I think that concept is super interesting of having like one super large enclosure and then, allowing all the other snakes. Cause then you could have, because I think a lot of times people, okay, we're going to put this carpet python in a 4x2 because that's the space I can allot to it and still have my other snakes and like work on the breeding projects that I want to have. Which I'm all for because I love breeding projects. I've got animals that I, want to involve in breeding projects one day. I'm in the same boat. Like I want to have as many snakes as I can while still allowing them the space. But I think allowing them to have that large, tall enclosure for a certain period of time that's also got all these smells of like another male carpet python or a female
Yeah.
or like whatever is a super interesting concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's
and I feel like if you made it big enough, you could connect four by twos on either side with just four portals to it, and you open one day and let them. It's just and you just rotate. And then if you do, I know like a simple thing to do would be like put this male shed in with this male. Like if you ever have done that during breeding, those males go crazy. They dig their nose in the shed and they're really into it. And it's very stimulating for them. So I think it would be, I mean, it definitely wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that that center enclosure idea is super interesting and maybe something down the road to try for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try to figure something out. Absolutely.
Yeah. I've seen people do like the playground, where they've got like a bunch of PVC pipes and stuff for their animal to come out and use. But that's something that like you've got to supervise all the time, and it's not like they can spend a day, 2 days, or whatever perched up at the top, like and still have heat and be able to exist normally as they would in an enclosure, but a large thing. So I think having that with the PVC, entrances is super interesting.
Yeah, and I've even considered like, because I don't know if everybody knows, but I'm in the St. Louis area, so we get pretty hot during the summer, So I've even thought about building a big outdoor enclosure just to like cycle snakes in a couple, a week at a time or whatever.
Yeah.
Just something. I mean, I always have something I want to do. It's just finding the time and kind of dialing that in, getting it snake escape proof, but also raccoon and hawk proof and all that stuff. So
yeah, it's the scary part of outside. The thing is you got a big dog, so you might be okay. The animals might be scared off.
He does keep the squirrels away, that's for sure.
Yeah. Side tangent really quick and we'll get back to it. But my old roommate used to live with me, obviously, and he had a dog. And so his dog would be outside all the time and play fetch with it, whatever. We would occasionally see animals out there, but not often. Since he's left, man, herds of deer, herds of them, just all over the backyard, possums, like all kinds of stuff that I didn't see before. So it's just really interesting how a dog's scent kind of puts things like that off.
Oh yeah.
But
they speaking of the for sure.
Yeah. I think just like the smell of them being there. I don't know. But speaking of the outdoor enclosure, because you made me think of it. Our buddy Zach, who Brendan's beautiful female tiger coastal carpet python is with, he actually kept his brettles outside during the summer and spring and fall, and he was like I don't even know what kind of enclosure it was. Maybe it was like for ferrets or something like that. But it was a tall, like 5-foot enclosure, completely screened, and then it had like a box up at the top. And dude, these these Brettles never, they were, every time I came over and saw them, maybe they left the box sometimes, but they were always up top, man. Always up top in that box, hanging out right over the top. And I was like, that's the way a Brettles python wants to be. It's up
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
Interesting.
And then they're all also like, I mean, they're all individuals, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who says otherwise just
Yeah.
they haven't observed enough because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just looking around now, like I have two carpets and these guys just ate last week and they're both just like upside down, just waiting for someone to walk by,
Yeah.
constantly perched, always as high in the cage as they can. And then I have
Mm-hmm.
others, like this one right here, is always on the ground, front of the cage, on the ground, just
Yeah.
staring out. It's just they're
It's
all
weird. Yeah.
individuals. They're so different, but still the same. It's crazy.
Yeah. That's something super interesting too that I think would be a good topic for us to discuss. It's just like, you or I talking about an individual animal that we own and how we adapted our care specifically for that, or if we have any guests, asking them
Yeah.
about that, because I think that's just as important as keeping an animal. I think obviously like parameters like temperature, humidity, things like that, you want to keep the same, but like
Hmm.
how you design the functionality of an enclosure could change based on how that individual animal uses it, um, which is I think super interesting to think about.
Yeah, we could do like a multi-part thing on that too. 'Cause
Yeah.
there's so much to it. And I know like
Hmm.
behind the scenes we've been talking about different topics and stuff and there's I mean there's just so much to all of this that
Yeah.
if you sit down and really think about it, you could go crazy just trying to build enclosures and like not even just the care of the animal, just what they live in. You can go
Yeah.
so you can go crazy, insane, expensive if you want, or like us, we do this on a budget. You know, we both have full
Yep.
time gigs. This isn't our full time thing, and we do it to the best of our ability while still maintaining that level of thought and care. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that touches too on a topic I definitely want to talk about, which is the concept of like studying your animal and like really understanding what your animal is doing day to day and how
Mhm.
they're using their environment and what they like to eat and what they like to do and where they like to sleep and things like that, and how you can study your specific animal and then also extrapolating that onto how you can go further in researching your animal, because I think a lot of people tend to look up a care guide and call it a day versus I've got these South American wood turtles, and there's not, I mean, there's like one care guide on them, but it's like, I was reading scientific papers for days on them, because there is stuff out there for even the most obscure stuff. There's usually
Oh
some
yeah.
stuff out there. And I think leveraging those scientific papers and understanding how to read them and how to, take that information and then apply it, because it's not
Mhm.
like, you're going to read this stuff and be like, okay, well, this, this smooth fronted caiman eats 90% scorpions in the wild. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't feed 90% scorpions. And this is just there was some fact about them eating a significant number of scorpions, but it wasn't 90%, but just for example. But like, how do you take that and apply that? Like, do you then feed dubia more heavily because it's more
Hmm.
similar to scorpions, or how do you alter your care based on that? Which I think is a super interesting topic. But
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think I think what we should do though, Brendan, is I think we should talk about your Polychrus enclosure
Yeah, I was just about
and
to
your
transition
Polychrus
to
and
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Can we get one thing straight though? How do you say Polychrus? Is it Polychrus? Polychrus?
I think it's
How do you say it?
Polychrus. Polychrus, I think. I don't know.
Polychrus. Okay.
I've actually never heard anybody say it, so I don't know. I think it's Polychrus. I don't know. I'm sure you can say it either way. But
Polychrus. Okay, but you say
I say
Polychrus.
Polychrus.
Okay,
That's what
cool.
sounds. I'll have to ask Roy and see how to say it.
Yeah. So okay, so before you talk enclosure, can you tell us like a little bit about them, how you got them, like what they've been in, that kind of thing?
Yeah, okay. So they are the common monkey anole, or common bush anole, I think is the other name.
Okay.
It's Polychrus marmoratus, I think is how you say it. I could be butchering that. I don't know. I'm not good at Latin names, but
Latin's a dead language anyway.
yeah, exactly. So they're a species of anole
Mhm.
ish from like Guyana, that area, South America, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't even know they existed until I know like a lot of people follow Roy at Wellsprings Herp, and if you don't, you definitely should because he's just insane. We can That's a whole other tangent, but he would like post them up, and I'd see them, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I wasn't really like an anole guy. Like I was never really into them. Like I was when I was younger. I kept like green anoles just like everybody else did. But then like he kept posting them and like handling videos and them eating like mantises and like this crazy stuff, and they just look super cool. And from what I knew then, they were all wild caught. There was no captive bred babies in the U.S. at all, or at least that I knew of. So I didn't really want to like get in a wild caught pair and have to transition them to captivity. So I never really followed up on it until I saw Roy actually produced captive bred babies. Um, I think he had his first clutch, was it 2 years ago? I could be getting that wrong, but I think he's had two or three clutches of them now. So I started messaging him, just asking questions about him, and he's such a cool, laid back dude that he would just like send me paragraphs and paragraphs back of like all the natural history and like everything about him. So then we worked out a deal, and he sent me a captive pair of babies that he produced, which I'm so grateful for to this day. I've had them, I guess it's been a little over a year now. I've
Oh
had
wow,
them.
I didn't realize it's been that long.
Yeah, dude, I know it's gone by quick. So they're currently, and they have been in a 2x3 repi zoo, like a 2x2x3. Um, and like I can go on about repi zoo enclosures and how much I enjoy them, but
I think you should.
yeah, I definitely can't. The cheapest, coolest enclosure you can buy, all glass. They're insane. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
They come flat shipped, like flat packed. They're easy to put together. They're so cool.
Yeah.
But so
I've got
they've
a
been.
I've got a bunch too, and I think having some sort of accessible enclosure that can be shipped to your door like that is
Yep.
unbeatable. And obviously, it's not like an Exoterra or a Zoomed brand, and you're not supporting like an American company, but like American companies should have been doing this. So
Absolutely.
you just
Yeah.
gotta,
And for
yeah,
the price point, man, it's a no brainer. Like
yeah,
they're fantastic enclosures. I only have two of them right now, but I plan on definitely getting more. But
yep,
so I set this enclosure up as like, so they're the only thing I really knew about them, minus like what Roy told me, was they're highly arboreal. They're insects and fruit. They eat fruit apparently. Mine have yet to eat any fruit for me, but they apparently do eat fruit in the wild. Um, and they at night they sleep on like very low branches close to the ground. So I built this enclosure out with all of that kind of in mind. It's full bioactive, real plants. They have all the Arcadia goodies and all that fun stuff. So I've been just like slowly working with them. I got them pretty hand tamed now, and then I try to come in here throughout the day at multiple times just to kind of observe where they're at, what they're doing. You know, um, the female is definitely much more timid, so she's normally hiding during the day. Um, if I come here early in the morning, she'll be up basking or she'll be under the UVB. But like other than that, she's like behind a stick. I can't see her. The male is definitely the more bold one. He's always out on a monstera leaf, just kind of chilling, looking at me. So I've just been slowly working with him, feeding him, working with him, trying to get him to come out, all that stuff. But with this new enclosure build that I'm finally doing, it's a 3x18x4 tall. It's like four sliding glass doors. It's a repti zoo also. It's insane. It's heavy as hell, but it's super cool. Um, And I've just like been taking mental notes on where they like to spend most of their time and how I can better suit this enclosure for them as individuals than the last one. So I know me and you, Jack, is on different things, with like the UVB and up in the UVB percentage and all that stuff.
Yeah. Can we really quick talk about what they're currently in and like all the equipment and stuff that you have for that, and then talk
Yeah,
about, how what you think needs to change and how you're changing it and stuff like that?
yeah. So they're in the 2x3.
Mm-hmm.
They have the 7% Arcadia UVB. What's the name? It's not the Jungle Dawn. Is that what it's called? Or is that the LED light? I get them
That's the
confused.
LED. Yeah, that's the LED. It's. I think it's like the. I don't
I
know.
forget what it's called.
It's the 12% bulb.
Yeah,
I'll
well,
tell you.
they currently have the 7%
Oh, sorry,
on
Shade Dweller. Shade Dweller.
Shade Dweller. That's what it's called. Yeah, so
Yeah,
they have
yeah, yeah.
the 1 foot Shade Dweller 7%
Mm-hmm.
UVB. I have the 2 foot Jungle Dawn LED from Arcadia on there as well, which grows plants phenomenally. Like I have a
Yep.
Monstera in there now. It's like about to bust to the top. It's so big. It's
Best light on
insane.
the market for sure.
Absolutely. And I know Arcadia's pricey, but it's worth it. It's worth every penny.
Yep.
Um, and then I just have like a generic 50-watt heat bulb on them. Nothing crazy there. Just keeps the hot spot about 90, 80, 88, 90.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's just I got the big Monstera in there, which definitely helps. It creates, now that it's big, it creates like a lot of shaded pockets. So they have a lot of options on temperature, on UVB, and LED also. Like they can hide up under a leaf and get absolutely no light, or they can come out and do what they need to do. But it's I mean, it's definitely a cool build. It's my favorite one to date, but it's but the plan is to eventually breed these guys, so I want them to have as much space as possible, and they're growing quick. And for those of you that don't know, they have like an insanely long tail, so they they use it to kind of, I don't want to say they use it for balance, but they kind of curl it around sticks and stuff when they're climbing and all that stuff. But yeah, the enclosure is definitely suited its purpose. Um, I have better ideas. I have bigger ideas that I think will suit them better. More lowland, like lower branches for sure. Because like I said, they do sleep towards the ground, and this current cage doesn't really have anything for them to sleep on low, so they both kind of sleep in weird positions, I guess. Um, Other than that, like that's really the only physical thing I want to add, minus more plants, obviously more temperature gradients. Because in a 2x3, you can't really get that big of a gradient. But in this 4 foot cage, I'd like to really really work on that and dial that in too.
Gotcha. I am sorry. I was listening the whole time. I'm trying to share the screen. Um oh god. Share. No. Okay. We'll figure this out eventually. We'll definitely share some pictures maybe on the Instagram
Yeah.
when we release this of this enclosure, because I definitely think that people should see it. Sorry,
No, you're
again,
good.
trying to figure this out. don't
It's gonna
don't
take some
necessarily know what we're
time.
doing. It's going to take some time. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's an amazing enclosure that he's got now. I was lucky enough to see it in person, and it just, I mean, the plant life that you have in there growing is awesome. I think a lot of people kind of shy away from growing plants in their enclosure, just because they think about house plants and they're like, well, I didn't have as good a luck doing house plants, just outside of an enclosure. Or how can I do it inside? And I think a species like the Polychrus is the perfect animal to do that with, because they're light animals and they can sort of use the plants without killing them.
Yeah.
Which can't be said about all animals. And I don't think that growing plants is necessarily as hard, especially when you do it in a terrarium that's already humid. A lot of houseplants don't like the humidity of a normal house. It's too low for them to really flourish. So I think doing it in an enclosure is a lot easier, especially if you're going to be misting the enclosure for the animal already.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll definitely have to share some pictures of that, because it's an amazing enclosure. And then we'll have to share some pictures of the new one as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I just got to get working on it before I share any pictures. But
yeah,
I'm currently in the midst of building the background for it, but it's nothing to look at right now, and it won't be anything to look at for a while.
So the background you have in the current one, how did you do that?
Oh yeah, so I did it's spray foam mostly. I took a note out of Serpa Designs, the egg crate light diffuser on the back, and then sprayed the foam over that to kind of adhere more, so it sticks more. Because I've been having an issue with the spray foam like breaking away from the foam boards. It just doesn't want to stick for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm just putting too much on at once or what. I haven't really figured that out yet, but so it's spray foam, and then I put like the small black plastic planters throughout it with like sticks and bark and stuff, and I kind of foamed all that in. And then I tried to do the eco earth thing, where you just like throw the eco earth and the sphagnum moss on it and kind of press it into the foam while it's still wet.
Yep.
But I think the foam was just dry enough to where it didn't really stick. So if you look really close in the pictures and in the background, you can see the black. I used black foam. Thank God I didn't use the whites or the
yellow.
Yeah, the yellow stuff. So you can't really tell until you look at it. But a lot of that's fallen off. And another thing I noticed, their claws are pretty gnarly and they like to run up and down the background. So they've kind of knocked the rest of it off that was sticking. So we're gonna do dry lock for this next one, because
you are okay.
It's tried and true. I've done 3 of them now, and they've all held up pretty well. So we have some ideas on how we're gonna do that. My girlfriend's a legit artist, so she's definitely gonna help me make it look cool.
Shout out to Christy. She did the walls behind Brenden.
Behind Brenden. She painted all the. You can't really tell, but there's like plants and stuff on the bottom side of the walls. But
it's amazing. Trust me.
Yeah.
The dry lock is. I just recently used it on an enclosure, and it's like honestly the easiest way to do these. Like I can't believe it's taken me as long as it has to do dry lock. But it's super interesting because it's tintable, so you can tint it to the base color you want, and then you can kind of paint it the way you want it to be. And I think honestly, you can make it look more like dirt than throwing dirt on a background or cocoa fiber. I think it actually looks better than cocoa fiber in a lot of cases. So
yeah,
that'll be sweet. So are you going to do all 3 walls or just the back wall?
So I think I'm just gonna do the back wall.
Gotcha.
Because I really like to see into the enclosure on 3 sides.
Yep.
It looks better to me personally. So we're gonna go about a foot off the bottom, and then side to side to the top. So it's gonna end up being like a 3x3 background, which is probably gonna be the biggest one I've done yet. So It's gonna be a process for sure.
Speaking of that, with just doing the background, can you talk a little bit about like where you've got it placed in the room for viewing? Yeah, for viewing.
Yeah, so this room is, I think it's 12 by 8 or 9 maybe. So it's longer than it is wide. So as soon as you walk into the door, the enclosure is like right there on your left. So if you sit at the far end, it's like center stage, like straight on, perfect viewing. And eventually it's going to be, as soon as you walk in the door, it's going to be the first thing you see is the plan.
Yeah.
So
That's
I want it to
amazing.
be kind of the centerpiece enclosure in the snake room at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have other plans for the gecko room, obviously. But
I think that where you place the enclosure is super important for how you're going to design the enclosure as well.
absolutely, yeah.
And I think the way you're doing it is super cool from like a human perspective of being able to view them, but also from their perspective of being able to, see, because like we were saying, the way your room is with, the walls and everything like that, it's not like they're going to be in some like bright white
Yeah.
sterile space or like a house where they're going to be looking into, other snake enclosures and the walls and everything like that. So having 3 areas for them to view, I think, is interesting.
Yeah.
And also something that, like, I don't know, could be a little controversial is, people are like, okay, you've got an entirely glass box and you want to black out, all sides you can to make them feel so secure. But I think the important thing for you is that you've got them pretty well used to you. So they're
Yeah.
not like, you walk in the room and they're running because they're scared or something like that. So I think that perspective makes it cooler of the way that you're going to put it in there or set up the location of the enclosure.
Yeah, for sure. And like the new enclosure, I don't know how much it really matters, but they're facing the only window in the room now, or they will be. So they'll kind of be able to see that day night change in lighting, which we'll see if that I don't if that makes a difference or not, but
Yeah.
it can't hurt.
No. Yeah. I think anything's better than nothing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you doing? I know we talked about changing UV. So you're going up to 12, right?
Yeah, we're going to 12% to kind of so they can get better UVB lower down because it's a taller cage. It's a foot taller than their cage now. So I know we talked about the other night, and you said go with the 12. So
yeah, and I think also for people listening, like if you don't know what percentage UV to use, if you're using Arcadia products, they have a great guide on their website that you can kind of put. It's mostly common species. They have some definitely obscure species on there, but you kind of got to think about what's a similar species. I know we said for you, like maybe in a knoll or something
yeah,
would be something similar. But you kind of go in there and extrapolate. But they've got different distances, so you're like, okay, the lizard's going to be at its optimum basking spot, it's going to be 12 inches or whatever from the light. So then they're like, okay, you would want to use, I don't know, like a 12% or whatever for that animal in order to get the correct Ferguson zones. So I think leveraging that guide is super useful when you're making decisions like that, because you want it to be right. You're going to spend way too much money on a UVB bulbs and the fixture. You want it to be the correct one for you. So I think doing that ahead of time is always good. The other thing too is screen. Depending on the type of screen you're using, can block out a good bit of UV. That's one thing I do like about the ReptiZoos is the screen that they have on them is it's thicker. The actual metal is thicker, and then it's wider. The holes are wider than like an EXO, which is an EXO would be like a like maybe a pasta strainer, maybe a little bit smaller than a pasta strainer. And then the ReptiZoos are more like, a heavier gauge metal, but then wider holes. So you get better UV penetration through them than you would through an Exoterra.
Yeah. And another thing too about the ReptiZoos, I know at least the 2x3 I have change out 2 of the side panes for mesh. They come with like an extra mesh piece. So if you need more ventilation through the sides, you can because those glass pieces just kind of snap in. They're interchangeable.
Yeah.
So if you need more ventilation and you just want to, you just need a little bit more and you want to just put one side of screen in, you can. Or if you
Mhm.
want to do both and a top, you can. They're very customizable.
Yeah. I
Which,
have the screens in mine because I've
yeah.
got snakes in mine, so I don't need to maintain any sort of humidity other than the ambient in the room. So
Hmm.
I definitely use those, and I think they're great because more airflow is definitely always better if you can do it without sacrificing anything else, for sure. That's
Yeah.
the best thing about these reptizoos is how customizable they are, and like they're just great. We should have a whole episode on reptizoos.
Yeah. Refuse sponsor us, please.
um, so I think something interesting about this enclosure that we were talking about is the situation with your ceiling and where you're going to do the light.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I have my rooms are in my basement. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. So my ceilings are only like 7 foot. After we drywalled the ceilings, it kind of dropped out another half inch. So they're like 6.5, 7 foot. Um, the enclosure is 4 foot. It's on a like 3.5 foot stand. So you do the math. It's almost touching the ceiling. So like a normal heat lamp dome won't fit on the top of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm gonna go with the in cage heating, the light, I think, with the guard on it or whatever. And I was thinking so like when I go to bed, dude, all I do is think about like these cages and like what I want to
Mm-hmm.
do. And
Yeah.
I kept coming back to like zoo enclosures where they'll have a heat lamp up top that's like
Mm-hmm.
say 92 degrees, just for an example. And then
Yep.
they'll have like a ledge that has the heat lamp built into the bottom side
Yep.
of it.
Yep. Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
say that one's 85 or 86 degrees, to
Yep.
where like the animal has, if they want to get warm but not hot, they can go to the lower one. Or if they really want to go hot, they can go up, which is like
Yeah.
towards the sun, quote unquote, and it's hotter.
Yep.
So I was trying to think about how I can add like two different basking zones in this enclosure, and I haven't gotten there yet, but
Hmm.
I kind of want to mess around with that and see if I can, because there's two animals and they're gonna, they cohab.
Yeah.
So I'd like to have, especially when they get adult size, I'd like to have two separate basking zones for them eventually.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be
Yeah.
kind of cool to mess around with and see if it's possible to do in this enclosure or
Yep.
not. I don't know.
There's a person on Instagram. I think Passionate Snakes. You heard of
Yeah.
them?
Hmm.
Yeah. They did an enclosure recently where they had a basking pole built into the enclosure, but behind the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could reference that. But I think that's interesting an interesting concept of having areas for both animals to bask independently.
Hmm.
And I think it's a concept that maybe we continue to touch back on, each episode when we're talking about different animals and how we're doing it, but like the concept of significant behaviors and allowing the animals to express them.
Yeah.
And I think with co-having two animals, you got to have not just enough room for them to bask, but enough spaces for them to bask without stress. Because
Right.
I think when it's a crowded basking spot, it can be stressful. Um, I've experienced this with some of my turtles of not even there's enough basking room, but if you have two turtles who want like the optimum basking spot
Hmm.
in that area, they're gonna jaw at each other a little bit, and I've seen them open their mouths at each other, which is really kind of funny to see a
Yeah.
turtle do that. But yeah, having two, if you're gonna co-have animals, I think having two basking areas is always a good idea,
Hmm.
to allow
Absolutely.
them to express that behavior on their own,
Yeah, and I've
without the
I've
stress.
noticed too that with these two in this 2x3, there's just one basking spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice more often than not the female's on it and the male's not. And every time I come in here, she's underneath the bulb just getting all the heat. And he's like kind of close, but not really there.
Yeah.
So I would like to have multiple spots just to ensure that he's doing great. He's eating fantastic. He's growing like crazy. So it's not detrimental at this point.
Yeah.
but I would like to offer another separate spot that if he wanted to, he could use the main one.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like it's women, man. It's like when you're in bed and your girlfriend takes all the covers, man. That's what's
Oh
happening.
yeah. And then they
Yeah.
shove their cold feet on your leg. Yes.
Yep. Classic. Classic. No, that's interesting. What do you when you feed them, how do you like is there a zone that they eat in, or is it they just kind of eat wherever, or how do how do you do that?
So with the male, it doesn't matter. Wherever he's at, I just because they're tongue feeding pretty great now. So
Gotcha.
if I'm in a rush or if I have like things I need to get done, I'll throw in some crickets just like to let them chase around, for like the enrichment factor. Um, but the male, it doesn't really matter where he's at in the enclosure. He'll readily eat. The female, on the other hand, is still very skeptical of. She's gotten a lot better. Before, when I went in the cage, she would run, like she would just instantly be gone. Now she kind of stays still, but she's still very weary of me.
Mm-hmm.
So her, I gotta set aside 25, 30 minutes specifically just for her to uh to even start taking like roaches off tongs. Um, so I have the chair that I'm in now for a few minutes and let them kind of get used to me being there with the doors open. And
Yep.
then I'll start feeding the male, and she'll see him eating, and then I'll slowly go to her and try to offer her one. And it's so crazy because their eyes like do the almost like the chameleon thing sometimes. Like the way they move is just insane. And she'll look at the roach and then she'll look at me in the eyes and then she won't take anything. So I have to almost like hide my face behind like
Yeah.
put a leaf between me and her and just kind of fish my tongs up and just wiggle and she'll take. But I've also noticed recently that if I have a roach on the tongs and I kind of put it on a stick to where they start kind of crawling, she hits it instantly.
Hmm.
So I've been doing that a lot more lately. So she's getting better, but she's still pretty weary of tong feeding.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think going back to the topic of significant behaviors, I think you've got behaviors that should probably remain stagnant or non-changing, like a basking area. If you think about it in a wild, like a lizard on a rock, like they're gonna know that rock, at a certain time of day, is going to be the best place for them to bask, and so they'll keep going to the same rock to bask or the same stick or whatever. And so that's something not stagnant, because in the wild the sun will change. So maybe I mean that's a complex thing to change in a fake setting, but that one to me is something that would remain more stagnant. But I think feeding is something that would happen in the wild all over the place. Like
Yeah.
it would occur wherever they are, wherever they can find food. It's they're hunting, so they're actually going out and looking for it. But something like basking or sleeping or something like that would be like a standard location versus like a variable one, which is interesting to think about when you design an enclosure. Like, okay, where will they bask? Where will they eat from? Where will they sleep?
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think knowing that they're tongue fed in a similar manner to like locating the enclosure in an area that they're comfortable, because you've already sort of conditioned them to be comfortable with you. You've already sort of conditioned them to feed wherever they are off of tongs. So it's interesting to think about like how you can train an animal to adapt to its enclosure as well. Not
Yeah.
necessarily train, but like condition an animal to adapt to its enclosure as well, and balancing like what you want them to adjust to versus what you want to keep more natural, or not necessarily natural, but like how they want to do it versus like how you want them to do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that with this new enclosure, I'm curious to see if the height plays a factor in them feeding, or especially the female feeding more readily. If she's
Yeah.
like because even standing, this enclosure is, a foot taller than I am.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see if she's up high, if she'll take food more readily if I'm lower than she is. So I'm like less intimidating.
Hmm. Are they? So you said they're called the bush anole.
Yeah.
Are they in the wild? Would they be like in the bushes, like lower, I guess, or mid or canopy level, or
From what I've read, I think they're higher up during the
okay,
day, and then they come down at night to sleep.
okay,
So it makes me think that the reason she's not, because like I said before, like all these animals are individuals. So I feel like
yeah,
if she feels intimidated, she's not going to take food off tongs. I shouldn't expect her to. But I feel like if she's up high, comfortable, and knows she can get away from me if she wants to, if that'll play a bigger role in like her readily tongue feeding without me having to sit here for a half hour and she takes 3 roaches.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. It would make your life more or easier, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. Like, for a while when bioactive, I guess, first came on the scene, everyone was like, "This is the easiest way to keep your reptiles," and there's a level of truth to that, and then there's a level of like that's not true. It's a lot more work. You got to maintain plants and all that.
Oh yeah.
But I think on a whole, it is easier because it allows the animal to do all its natural behaviors and express or act the way it wants to,
Hmm.
versus you having to manipulate it to do so. Um, like I think of like a carpet python that you've got in a rack, let's just say. In order for you to get like a natural behavior out of it, like climbing or doing anything, you got to take it out and like allow it to express that.
Yeah.
Which I think is a standard of care that needs to be there. If it's going to be in a rack, like it's got to come out and move.
Hmm.
um, and so if you're keeping naturalistically or in a proper setup in that aspect, it is easier because it allows it to do all those things without you having to intervene and do it or help it do it, if that makes sense. I don't know, I'm just rambling
Yeah,
at this
and
point, but
the key word there is proper do it. Like if you set up a bioactive incorrectly, then it's going to be extremely difficult
yeah.
to manage and take care of it. But if you take the time, spend the money where it needs to be spent on things it needs to be spent on,
Mhm.
and take pride in building the enclosure, and then yeah, it's the easiest way to keep.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah,
have to, there are certain things you have to do, and if you don't do those things, then it's going to be a nightmare for you no matter what.
absolutely, absolutely. The first time I had the first real bioactive cage I had was for my eastern king snake, and if you've kept king snakes, you know that bioactive and king snakes don't necessarily go together that well all the time. They're terribly destructive snakes. It's almost impossible to keep plants with them. So the plants obviously were uprooted and dead within a week. Um, but I had isopods in there and they boomed like crazy. So I was like, yes, we're good. This is bioactive. It's good to go. But without the plants in there, they weren't removing any of the nitrogen from
Hmm.
the soil, and it became a hazard, a health hazard for the snake. Like the snake ended up getting an RI, and I had to bring it to the vet. It was a whole ordeal. The snake is absolutely perfect now. I've got it still for sure, and she's wonderful. She's beautiful. But I really learned from that, like it's got to be done right and right for the animal. Like I don't think I would necessarily keep the king snake in a bioactive setup because I would just have to be, constantly changing out soil and making sure that the nitrogen levels and the bacteria levels aren't too high um, for that snake. But, something that's not going to bury, I
Yeah.
think carpet pythons, as large as they are better suited to bioactive setups than something like a king snake that's going to burrow just because they're not going to be uprooting plants. They might crush the plants,
Yeah,
but
for
I
sure.
guess the key is making sure that the plants are, established ahead of time so that they can actually grow. But I think that's a whole talk for another another episode about bioactivity and how you can do it. But
yeah, that's a big thing is allowing the enclosure to establish before you start adding anything into it. And that's the hardest part, because as soon as you get a cage done, you want to throw the animal in and see what it does. But if you do that, it could work, but it might not. And all these plants that you bought and meticulously put in places are just going to get uprooted and just demolished. So you definitely have to take that into account.
Absolutely. I think the thought process of allowing an enclosure to mature is hard, or it's easy to think about, want to do, but much harder to do, especially when you're limited on space and you're like, okay, I got to move this animal out so I can do the next one or whatever. But I think the patience is really the hardest, but also the best part, because then, once you do add that animal in, all that hard work is going to pay off versus adding that animal in and then it absolutely destroying the plants, or the microfauna not being established and ready to actually support an animal like that.
So. Yeah, absolutely. Like this new monkey lizard enclosure, it's going to be just plants and isopods and springtails for a while, because they're still the cage you're in now is still perfectly fine for the pair. They're still small. So I mean, I may just let it go for the next 3 or 4, 5 months and just kind of let it grow in and see how the plants grow, where they grow to, kind of deal, and then put them in. So it's time consuming. It's a long process, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth it. So speaking of plants, we talked about background. I think we should talk about plants that you plan to put in there, and maybe also soil that you're going to use.
So I'm torn on the plant subject, because I talk to Roy pretty regularly now, which is still, I'll fangirl out every time, but it's just that we're on some sort of a friendship level now. He has a legit biotope for his, with like plants from where they're from. It's legit setup. And he had mentioned just sending me some cuttings of his enclosure to kind of propagate into mine, but we're midwinter right now. Yeah. So there's no shipping of anything going on for at least the next 2 or 3 months, probably.
Yeah.
So I plan on, and this may change, I may just uproot everything whenever I can get those clippings in. I don't know yet, but I want to pull the big monstera out of their enclosure now, because it's just, it needs, like, the leaves are getting so close to the lights that they're starting to burn, Yeah. And I don't want that to become a hazard in its own, So I'm going to pull that. That's going to go in there for sure. I have a big hanging basket of pothos I bought I didn't know IKEA sold live plants, but they do, and they're insane. They're fantastic. So I bought a big, like, vining pothos that I'm going to try to hang from the top to kind of vine down. And then other than that, I don't really know what all I'm going to put in there yet. I'd like to get some more like mid-ground plants. Yeah. Because in their enclosure now, it's just the pothos has taken over the ground, and then they have the big monstera up top, but there's really nothing in between those two. Yep. So I want to find, I need to find some plants that grow like 1 to 2 foot tall that are kind of bushy. I did get a peace lily I'm thinking about putting in there to kind of cover that, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm torn. I want to wait for the clippings. I think a biotope would be super cool, but I may just add them in later, and it'll be like a biotope plus ish. Yeah. I think that's interesting though, because I think one thing we should also highlight is you and I both are very into fish keeping as well. And I think biotope is, a huge trend, or like, I don't know if it's a trend. It's like
it's just a thing that people like to do in the fish keeping world a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's easier in the fish keeping world just because they
Mhm.
have, you're not using common house plants, so you can order actual aquarium plants and from the area and the specific fish and stuff like that. So I think it a little bit easier on the fish keeping side, but I think you can also do it in much smaller box, whatever. I think the concept of a biotope is really interesting, but I also think it's something that sometimes you think about, because I've thought about this too with like my carpet pythons. Like, oh, I want exclusively plants from Australia, and not
Yeah.
even just Australia, but like Queensland, right? And it becomes like almost stressful because
Mhm.
then you're like, I want to do this and I want to do it right, but I've got to wait, and I don't really want to do it that. I feel like I should, and there's this pressure on me because I said I wanted to do it, that
Yeah.
I want to do it. And it's almost like in the same way as carpet python people are like, or at least initially, like when you get a carpet, you're like, okay, I want to get the jungles, and I want to get the Darwins, and I want to get all the subspecies. You want to like complete the set. It's like part of our collector gene that we have, where we're like, we want to do it, and we want to collect it, and we want it to be exactly how it's supposed to be. And I think if you can, it's amazing. But I
Yeah.
also think sometimes it's a box that you put yourself in, and it creates stress,
Absolutely.
But no, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at too. Is like, because I mean, I stress myself out so easily on everything, just
Yeah.
because I'm an overthinker. So it's part of my natural cycle, I guess. But
Me too.
it's like and he could send the clippings in, and I put them in there, and they do great with the plants I already have. Or I wait, and this is my mind, but I
Yeah.
wait, I put all the clippings in there, and then somehow they all die, and then I'm back to
Yeah.
square one anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not concerned on building a biotope really. I just want it to be functional and look good, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I may just go ahead and build it out because I have the motivation and the want to do that now.
Yeah.
So, and then if he sends me the clippings, fantastic. I'll put them in there and see what they do, and then kind of revamp from there. But
Yeah.
I think I'm just gonna go for it because if I don't and I wait, it's not gonna be good. I can already feel it.
Yeah, I get that. Something interesting you just said though is I have the motivation to do it right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like this all the time, but like it building enclosures and like setting up enclosures the way we're talking about and the way we like want to do it going forward is like very hard work. Like painting backgrounds, especially if you're doing it on a large scale, is not easy. Cutting foam is not easy. It's exhausting, and when you work a full-time job, sometimes you're like, I don't want to do this afternoon.
Yeah.
I've got a project downstairs that's like 75, maybe 80% done, and I just haven't touched it in a minute. And I think artists get like that all the time. They start
Mhm.
painting and they walk away because they just get burnt out thinking about it. And I think what's important if you want to do it and do it on a large scale for a significant number of enclosures is like whenever you have the motivation to do it, just do it. Like
Yeah.
you can do it at that moment and just work on it. Like it doesn't even. I feel like a lot of times I get so like caught up in my head thinking about how I want this to look. And
Yep.
then I get part of the way through and I'm like, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And I lose all my motivation. And it's like, you just got to keep going, man. You just got to keep going and don't even look at it really.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
keep it working.
Yeah, and like you said, we both have a full-time job. I have a baby on the way.
Yeah.
So I got to
Congratulations.
really think about like what I want to do before that happens because once the baby's here, like I'm not going to have all this free time that I have.
Yeah.
I'm obviously going to still take care of the animals the best of my ability, and that's not going to change. But this like extra stuff of building backgrounds just willy nilly at midnight on a Tuesday just is not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm very much the type of person to like once I know what I'm going to do with an enclosure, I buy everything at once. Just I spend the money, I buy everything at once, so everything is here.
Yep.
And you're not building in the background and I forgot to get the tent for the dry lock, and you're already ready to paint, and then you have to go back to Home Depot, and it just ruins the whole flow of everything. So
which is going to happen the first time you build an enclosure. Like, you can't plan for everything because you don't know what you need. But
dude, I went back to Home Depot like 4 times and on a Saturday.
Yeah. It sucks. That's the worst killer.
Yeah, you want to make sure you have, first and foremost, an idea of what you want to do, and then get all of your supplies first. Don't start building anything until you have everything at your house.
Yep.
And then that's when you start, putting things together, because then you might have another idea midway through, and if you don't have the supplies for that, you may just not go through with it, and it could have been better, if that makes sense,
Absolutely. I think that's something too we should talk about it eventually, or have an episode on, is your DIY toolbox of things that you should just have on hand in the case that you want to do an enclosure or change up an enclosure or whatever.
And it helps too, because like I'm a diesel mechanic by trade, so I have a lot of
diesel.
I have a lot of tools and stuff at the house. I have a lot of acquired over the past 10 years of being a mechanic. So, and those have come into play many times building things. They're good to have.
Yeah. Buying a guy. Sometimes I like avoid a project because like, I'm going to need this certain tool, but sometimes it's like, you should do that project so you have that tool. Yeah. And then you'll just have it, for anything else. And then you've like opened up your horizon of things you can do.
Absolutely.
Love tools, man. That's man shit right there.
Yeah, I'm just now I'm starting to get into woodworking a little bit, and
nice.
I'm at the point now where I'm ready to start buying tools, and I'm so excited for it, man. Because I want to build I want nice stands for all the cages. Yeah, I want to buy those. I want to make them all myself. Like, absolutely. This whole basement, like me and my grandpa did all of this ourselves.
Yep.
So it's cool to be able to. Like whenever you and like the group comes down eventually to see the rooms and stuff, it'll be cool to be like, I built all of this,
Yeah, did it with my own 2 hands.
Yeah, like it took us a year to get it done, but it's done.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you wanted. Like, everything is used exactly the way you wanted, and you can like alter your plans like as you go through. Like, even just the stands that you're talking about building, like. Building something custom to be exactly what you want could not be more valuable. Like,
absolutely.
Once you get outside of like ball pythons, leopard geckos, red-eared slider, like even a red-eared slider, honestly, but like the typical pet reptiles, like there's not products that you need for the most part. Like, you got lighting and heat and all that. We've got that, but like, cages for the most part, like half the time you got to build like what you need for it to be right. The backgrounds, the stands, like everything we're talking about, like it just doesn't exist, especially when you're keeping something a little bit obscure, like a large turtle. Like, that's why I said a red-eared slider. Like, they don't sell a product that's suitable for a red-eared slider like commercially, right, for a red-eared slider. Like, you could get a stock tank and that would be good, but like even an aquarium for an adult red-eared slider is not great for it, and so you can't just go and buy a commercially available pet product for these animals. And so I think having the skill set to be able to build and do what you need to do for these animals is invaluable. Like, you're like, I'm just thinking about your Polychrus enclosure. Like, if you weren't able to build the background and set up the enclosure the way you're going to do it, and you were just like trying to find everything at PetSmart, like it would be impossible. I mean, you could probably keep them. Yeah. But like, would it be the same level as, would it be optimum care? Probably not,
And it would be outrageously expensive too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing. Thing. You'll save yourself so much money. You won't save yourself any time. It'll be much more time consuming.
Yeah. But it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it to say, when it's done and the animals are in there, be like, I did that. That was my idea that I put effort towards, made it what it should be, and now this is a result.
Yeah.
It's
And if
just,
you don't feel like that immediately after you make the enclosure, wait 6 months and then you'll feel like that.
yeah, give it time.
Give it time
All my
for sure.
backgrounds I've built so far, but now I can look at it and be like, okay, they're pretty cool.
They're
You know?
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we talked about it a little bit at the beginning. Like, no one, neither of us are wealthy people. We
No,
want to,
at all.
we keep probably too many reptiles for the, our wealth level. And so to do that, you gotta get creative and um, do the things we're going to talk about doing in
Yeah.
order to do it on the scale you want to do it. Like I want my enclosures to look like a zoo enclosure. Like you're going into a zoo reptile house and you're looking at these enclosures in a zoo, and zoos spend millions of dollars on reptile houses.
Yeah.
Obviously they've got a whole back area and a food prep and all that, but it's expensive for them to do that because they're paying people to do all the things that you can do yourself. Maybe not all the things, unless you're like Brenden, you can weld, but for the most part, like you can do all the things. You just got to learn how to do it.
Yeah, and it's definitely it's like, I don't know about you, but I'm not a very patient person.
Yeah.
So it's definitely practice in that area too, because like you said, I don't have the money to go out and spend all this money on to get all the cages done at once. It's kind of a slow process. Like, I'd like to eventually do all the exoterras, the cat geckos are in. I want to do all those backgrounds, but
Mm-hmm.
a dozen cages, that's a lot of work and a lot of
Yeah.
time. And when you start doing it on scale like that, it's a lot. And if they're smaller enclosures. But
Yeah.
I want to get to the point where, and I was talking to Christy about this the other night. I'm trying to like get her to like really get into the background thing, because then I
Mm-hmm.
think it'd be cool to offer like pre-cut, pre-made Exoterra backgrounds that you can just slide into your cage at home. If you
Yeah.
don't want to go through the whole process of building it, or you can't for whatever reason, I think it'd be cool to kind of offer, a certain number of Exoterra backgrounds pre-made that someone
Mm-hmm.
can just kind of slide in and go about their day. I think that'd be pretty
Yeah.
cool.
No, I think that would be cool. And I don't think that there's enough people doing it. Like as
No.
far as like a standardized like Exoterra size,
Yeah.
like you can't just go to a reptile show, or most reptile shows, I'm sure, Tinley and stuff, you probably could, but like you can't normally, if you're going to go there, they'll have like the Exoterra for sale, but they won't have
Mhm.
like the background. They'll have it pre-made in the Exoterra, but you got to buy the whole thing. So if you've
Yeah.
got the Exoterra at home, you can go and buy this. I think that's um, oh, invaluable. I also think it's funny because I used to look at, like Universal Rocks, or like, any of the people who do that. Cause like I said, there are people who do that. It's just not common. And I'd be like astounded at the prices. I'm like,
Yeah, man.
$124 or whatever it is for that. Are you kidding me? But then you go and do it yourself and you're like, okay, hold on. I think I just spent like $80 and
Yeah.
probably 20 hours of my own time, And
Yeah.
so what kind of value can you add to your own time? But,
Exactly.
for me, and I think also for you, um, we enjoy doing it, and it's relaxing and therapeutic for us, and frustrating all at the same time. But I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's something that gives me purpose and excitement, and something that I think about that's not work when I go to bed at night. And I think
Mhm.
um, not everyone's as fortunate to have that. And so I feel very grateful that I can get out of bed every morning and be excited and think about something that I'm going to do in the reptile room.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And you can cater to the animal you're building it for, which I mean we touched on already a little bit, but like if you have an animal that enjoys hiding more than another, you can literally foam in a cork tube into the background that they can crawl into, that you can't physically get them out of, you know, or there's so much you can do with a
yeah.
custom background that you build yourself, that it's worth the headache and the time and the money that it costs to do it and do it
Uh,
right. And it's a no-brainer, obviously, but I think we definitely should do some episodes on like the proper ways to go about, because a lot of people just don't know how to do it. You know, it's intimidating for a lot of
Yeah.
people. So I think if we kind of go through like a, not really a step by step, but like a, give out like a checklist of things that you should probably have if you want to do like a dry lock foam background.
Yeah.
Just something for people to reference and kind of give people the confidence to go out and at least try.
Yeah. I want to revise something I said, because I think I said earlier that it's hard to do a background. It's
Mm-hmm.
not actually hard to do a background. They're actually, I think, pretty simple and straightforward. It's just the work part of it that's
Yeah,
hard. But
yeah,
we want to encourage you guys to do the work,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
or
worth it,
buy
man.
one from Brenden. Not yet, but one day.
One day.
Yeah, but it's not hard, like difficult
Mm-hmm.
wise. It's actually, once you do it, it's like one of the most straightforward things you could do. And we'll definitely have an episode on that. But I would love to encourage everybody to go and try. A painter never learns how to paint unless they paint.
Exactly.
And I think that's exactly what you got to do. I honestly think it's like, I think keeping reptiles is something that I do because I love the reptiles and I love to watch the reptiles. But I think building enclosures is its own other hobby for me that's equally as value add for me,
Mm-hmm.
and makes me just as happy, sometimes probably even more happy than keeping the reptiles themselves, which is, I don't know if that's controversial to say, but I just love getting creative like that, man. Like it fires me up, man. Like
It
like
like,
you were saying,
dude, it
I
like
think about it.
unlocks a separate part of your brain. It's
Yeah.
so strange, man.
It's flow state, man. It's
Yeah.
like being a singer on a stage. It's like you are locked into what you're doing. Sometimes I'll play a podcast or listen to music, but I feel like when I'm doing it, I'm not really even listening. I'm just like zoned out, but in at
Mm-hmm.
the same time. And I'm just creating. And I love that. I think it's the best thing you could do.
Absolutely, yeah. And the first one's not going to be great. They never are. It's it's like, the first time you rode a bike, you probably fell a couple times. So it's worth the effort. The first one's not going to be great, so you may as well just put that in your brain now that you're probably going to mess some things up. But you just, as you go on the next one, you revise that first one, and then you move on to the next one, and you go back and you revise, and you just keep going and going, and eventually you're making insane things.
Yeah. And you're definitely gonna think that the first one is worse than it actually is. Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna be bad to you, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not bad at all. And it's probably pretty good. You're just super critical of yourself, which you and I both are when we do
Yeah.
it. I can't even look at an enclosure for a couple of weeks after I build it, because I'm like, I hate it. There's this thing that I wanted to do differently, but I think that's also how you get better,
Yeah.
being critical about it. And then, after you've already made mental notes of like what you need to do differently, then you can kind of take a step back and look at it and appreciate it and accept it for what it is.
And even if it is bad, which is, it's a possibility that it
Yeah.
just doesn't go well, then you learn something at least.
And you can rip it out and start again.
And you can rip it out and act like it never happened.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the great thing too about foam, is like, if you're going to use foam, like I mean, it's probably not going to be the cleanest pull away. You're going to have to do some scraping, but if you're using foam on glass or PVC, you can get that out.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Don't use concrete for your first one, I'll tell you that. I have a carpet python enclosure downstairs that's got probably 300 pounds of concrete in it, and that was it wasn't my first, but I think it was my third or fourth enclosure that I did, enclosure background. And all the ones before that were, the standard spray foam, silicone, cocoa fiber. And so I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do rock structures with concrete. And I laid chicken wire down and I put the concrete on. And then after it dried, I lifted it up and I was like, oh my God, how will I ever move this thing ever again? And it's got chicken wire in there, so you can't break it up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that thing can survive a nuclear bomb. That's for sure. But
Yeah, I'm definitely team dry lock for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, awesome. Well, I think we covered a lot of stuff on this first episode without giving too much away going forward. We're gonna have to figure out kind of our schedule on how we're gonna do this. I think preliminarily we're gonna do twice a month and see how it
Hmm.
goes.
Yep.
We're gonna be back, I guess, in 2 weeks.
Hmm.
When this comes out with an episode about Kevin, my smooth-fronted caiman, Paleosuchus trigonotus, his enclosure downstairs in my basement, and kind of how I built that and what the plan was and everything like that. And Brenden is now completely in the dark. Nighttime. So that's a sign that
My lights went out.
that's the sign. So, Brenden, any last words from you?
Yeah. So you kind of already said it, but we're thinking every like twice a month. It's not kind of overbearing. I think every week, for now at least, with both of our schedules, would be kind of a lot because we want to put thought into these episodes. We don't just want to kind of come on and just randomly talk about things. Like we want them fairly structured and so I feel like every 2 weeks would be the perfect amount of time to kind of get a game plan together and actually put out a good episode that we're proud of. So, and then eventually we want to get guests and stuff on to talk about their experiences, what they're doing with in terms of the naturalistic keeping side of things and the biotopes and the backgrounds and the cage builds and all that kind of stuff. Lighting, cohabbing. I mean, we kind of want to do a little bit of everything. So yeah, I think it'll be a good show.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think, like we said at the beginning, we're gonna focus, on naturalistic keeping and care, and see where that topic takes us each episode, and go from there. We appreciate y'all if you continued listening through this entire thing, our first episode. I think it was actually relatively good, so I'm happy with it. And
Yeah.
I want to say thank you, Brenden, for doing this with me.
Oh, absolutely, man. I think it goes without saying, but it's funny. Like I was like a huge fan of your Instagram before we even met, and then like you got added to the group chat, and then we've become like really good friends since then. It's just so cool, man. It's like the whole thing has come full circle. It's awesome.
That's so funny, man. I don't think I knew that actually. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
man, it's insane. Like I was following you way before like we even had a conversation.
That's wild.
So,
it's
yeah.
so funny how this works out, all because of social media, man.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be a good show. It's gonna be so much fun and just like a learning experience for hopefully not just us, but everybody that tunes in and listens.
Yeah, and a place for community as well, so we can make more of these connections where we're, like-minded individuals just trying to get more out of our hobby and really enjoy it to the level that we want to. So
yeah, and then we're gonna have an Instagram page for the podcast at some point.
we have it already. By the time this podcast is up,
yeah, it should already be a thing by now.
Yes,
but
follow us at Beyond the Terrarium on Instagram.
Yeah, and then BM Exotics is my Instagram. If you want to get a hold of me and talk about what I'm open to anything. I'll talk to anybody about anything reptile. So I don't really do like I don't really add random people on Facebook. So Instagram is definitely the spot if you wanna talk reptiles. So
yeah, and then same for me. Instagram is my only spot unless I'm in a group in Facebook. So Jack Oliver Reptiles on Instagram if you want to follow me or talk to me about anything. So with that, I think we want to say thank you guys for listening and tune in 2 weeks.
yes, sir.
Thank you.